ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track, and ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
Impact confirmed. The Slayer has been activated.
Demonic threat level increasing.
Hold the line!
All the power of hell cowering before one man.
id Software presents Doom: The Dark Ages. Available May 15th on Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 5, and PC. Pre-order now.
Rated M for mature.
5 immersive worlds, one amazing theme park. Get ready to explore the all-new Universal Epic Universe, featuring the wizarding world of Harry Potter, Ministry of Magic, Super Nintendo World, How to Train Your Dragon, Isle of Berk, and Dark Universe. Epic Universe opens May 22nd at Universal Orlando Resort. Our universe will never be the same. Tickets and packages on sale now at universalorlando.com.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix. 3 couples, 4 vacations, a lot to unpack. Watch The 4 Seasons, a new series starring comedy favorites Tina Fey, Steve Carell, Will Forte, Coleman Domingo, and more in a hilarious and heartfelt love letter to long-term relationships. Based on the original Alan Alda film. Watch The 4 Seasons, May 1st, only on Netflix.
At the Musial with Alan and Daniel, we'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
Good evening. Welcome into another edition of Meet Me at Musial. I'm your host, Daniel Shoptaw at C70. Getting closer and closer to Alan Medlock joining us, but we still have some excellent guests left, and that includes tonight's co-host, man in the other chair. He's used to hosting his own show, The Deal in the Cards, but it's Josh Jacobs. You'll find him at JoshJaco98. Josh, how are you tonight?
I'm good, Daniel. How are you, man?
I'm pretty good. I don't know. We only have me and you on this, so it's maybe a little confusing when there's not like 15 voices going on. How is the podcast going? How is the writing going? How is everything in that nature?
Yeah, it's fun. I joined on with those guys end of the 2023 season, which was quite a time to jump into the podcast space. But it was super fun, and it's been a fun journey with them. And yeah, I mean, like you said, sometimes it's 2 of us just kind of riffing, and sometimes we've got like 6 people on at a time, and sometimes it's the beat writers. Other times it's just us chop and shop. We had Brendan Donovan on recently, which was super fun. So it's fun, and then the writing as usual. I mean, love just being able to follow this team and provide a voice in the space. But then also, like, I'm always tuning into other people's podcasts and writing as well. Can't take in enough Cardinals baseball, and so it's a lot better of a start to the 2025 season than we've seen over the last 2 years, and so that makes it a little easier to follow as well.
For sure. I mean, here we are. Mother's Day being on Sunday, and last year, Mother's Day's when it all kicked off, right? It was like they were 12-24 or something of that nature. Things were looking just as bad as 23 did, and then they went on the run. Now, I mean, obviously they're not perfect, and obviously there's still angst around this team, but assuming that they don't blow a 10-run lead with 1 out left to go, they're going to be a game over 500 at this point, and I mean that's better than we expected.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you've got 39 games through the season right now. They're on, I mean, assuming again they don't blow a 10-run lead here with one out
Mhm.
left to go. They're gonna be 20-19. Last year they're 15-24. The year before that they're 24-25. And like you said, it's this 39 games into the season last year was the game 3 of that 4-game Milwaukee series. It was the day before Mother's Day. It was the day where you even had some beat writers being like, "We don't know if Ollie Marmol is going to make it out of Milwaukee with a job at this point."
Yeah.
There, it was just at the lowest of lows coming off of 2023, and then, like you said, it's not perfect. So I hope people don't think I'm about to try and paint the Cardinals as some World Series contender right now, but it's definitely a lot more optimistic, right? There's a vibe with this team. There's young talent to be excited about. There's a change in leadership coming. There's just a lot of different things to be excited about this team right now, a year later, and so. We love the vibe so far, but as we know of baseball, a week or two can change everything. So we'll see where they're at the end of May, but right now you got to like where they're at compared to where they've been the last few years.
Well, and you're absolutely right on the change because, here they are, they've just won their 6th straight game, but, a week ago, we're talking about, is this team ever gonna get it going, right? That had
Yeah.
a rough road trip, and it just felt like, the bullpen was terrible and everything was just going wrong, and now, granted, it's they beat the Mets, which is nice, and then sweeping or taking care of the Pirates, which is not something they've done in Pittsburgh, so they
Yeah.
give them that, and then a game here against the Nationals. They're taking care of the business they need to take care of right now, and that's a fun thing to see. I mean, the Cardinals put up 10 runs tonight, and they do it without a home run.
Yeah. And you kind of look at the team, and again, we're not, I don't need to keep prefacing it, but I'm going to. I'm not trying to paint them into some juggernaut in the making here. But last year's team, even when they got it rolling a little bit, like it was a mediocre starting pitching staff that could just
Mhm.
get you by, right? And then it was a lockdown bullpen that started to falter as the year went on. And then the part of the team that I was at least most confident in coming into the year was the offense, and it just fell flat time and time and time again. And this year's team is a top 12 unit in baseball right now, and they get on base and they hit for average. They slug, but they don't hit the home runs. I think they lead the league in doubles right now. They're like 19th or 20th in home runs. They hit with runners in scoring position, and if I'm thinking about can this team sustain what it's doing throughout the year, you need a bullpen to win in today's game. If you have a terrible bullpen, it's really hard to get by. You need competent starting pitching for sure. But the part of the team that I have the most optimism about it was the offense coming into the year, or at least had the highest ceiling, I should say. Maybe not,
Mhm.
maybe wasn't sure what it would do. And to see so many guys producing right now, it gives me hope that can they continue a run like this throughout the year. And again, if you're thinking about long-term big picture here, which I think is what most people care about, is I think most people know there's a limited ceiling of what this team can do this year, but what are the parts of this year's club that you can maybe see ramifications of in 2026, 2027, 2028? It's mostly the offensive core, and
Right.
that's the part of the team that's producing. And outside of a Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman, you have to love what you see from Victor Scott so far. Brendan Donovan's one of the best hitters in baseball so far to start the year. Newpar's been an on-base machine. Arenado's bounced back to an extent. Wilson Contreras is getting hot again. And then, of course, you get Ivan Herrera back today, who had 2 RBIs. And again, he's been a catalyst whenever he's healthy and in the lineup. And so if you're trying to find what to be optimistic about long term, you got to look at this offense. And so far, it's producing.
Yeah, yeah, and, they get Ivan Herrera back today, which is a big thing. And it's obviously just one more bat that's in that lineup that makes you feel pretty good about how things are going. Yeah, I think it's hard to know. I was trying to find it. Joe Sheehan had a little thing going on in his newsletter today. The Cardinals are actually the team that is second in batting average on poorly hit balls. They're
Wow.
hitting 305 on those, which is probably something that uh, one will probably regress a little bit,
Yeah.
but two, I feel like some of that's probably from Victor Scott, Mason Wynn, the speed that this team has that can beat out infield hits or weak things, and and do so in an exciting way. Now, granted, you don't necessarily want to build your team completely on that, but having that as an option it just adds another dynamic to this offense.
Oh, for sure. Especially out of that 9th spot right now, where you turn the
Mhm.
lineup over and it starts really at the 9th spot. Yeah, Victor Scott, Newpar, Wynn, Donovan, and it just keeps going. Especially once Ivan Herrera has been added back to this lineup, it really lengthens it out quite a bit. I also think that stat could be impacted by the fact that we've heard Brant Brown talk about like there's a time to slug and there's a time to get on base. And you see the approach of this team sometimes where there's 2 strikes or there's a runner in scoring position and you'll see a blue hit to the opposite field, or they'll just do enough just to get the runner in or just to get that single to get by. And some of that I think is intentional, where they're not trying to get the highest exit velocity, perfect launch angle on it. They're just trying to do what it takes to get the run in. And I like that they have that kind of approach this year. I would be curious from your angle though, like one of the big storylines coming into the year was will they give the runway? And they talked about giving runway to Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman. And then what do they do with it? And all the young guys we're naming off right now that are off to hot starts are not named Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman. Both of them. I mean, there's been some intriguing steps forward in Nolan Gorman's profile, but it's also come with basically zapping his power and slug from his bat. And then Jordan Walker just looks about as bad as he's ever looked at the major league level. I'm curious to your point. I mean, again, it's early May here, and so I don't think it's time to pull the plug on either of them. I think that'd be too early, and it goes against the runway conversation. But how concerned are you about these two bats that they really wanted to see some steps forward from this year, and they really haven't gotten it yet?
Yeah, I think that, and I thought it was very interesting, the comments that Mo had today in Katie Woo's article at The Athletic of basically, saying, yes, there's runway, but it's not infinite, which kind of takes away the whole idea of, giving them runway to some degree. Because part of that was, hey, we don't want them looking over their shoulder. We don't want them pressing. We just want them to go out there and do their thing. Well, now, I mean, we're already seeing that Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman are very rarely in this lineup at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. Because you don't want 2 outs if you can help it with as many good bats as you have. But the other side of that is, with comments like that, they have to start wondering, hey, I might not be going down for the next month, but, when is that, when do I hit that critical level? And it's got to be some, anxiety and pressure that's going on there that the club had, at least in part, said that they didn't want to add to those guys. But I don't know. I mean, I think this is where the Cardinals are getting stuck, where they often get stuck in that to try to have their cake and eat it too, right? I mean, they try to, do just enough here. They want to compete, but they don't want to, they want to develop. And I mean, pick a lane. And I think if you want to develop, you run Jordan Walker and you run Nolan Gorman out there every day. And if it looks terrible at the end of the year, then if you want to compete, then he probably should have done some different stuff in the offseason. But you also, you have to let these guys may have to go to Memphis. So I don't know. I think they've kind of put themselves in a terrible position, which is pretty par for the course.
Yeah, and I do think I would love your thoughts on this too. I think there's obviously all offseason they're talking 600 plate appearances, 600 plate appearances. So let's make sure it happens. The curious thing to me was always, well, it's interesting you say that all offseason and then Nolan Gorman's not a part of your starting lineup to start the year. That part was always odd to me. As much as I think Alec Burleson can be an intriguing hitter, it's like you didn't even give him the runway to start the year. But so he's already kind of a guy that's kind of not gotten that. But for Jordan Walker specifically, I think there's an element where you can say, hey, there's runway here, but I don't think they had to come out and say this offseason that if it looks like horrible, then that runway is going to be a little bit less than what we would have hoped. And I don't blame them if they say, hey, we wanted 600 plate appearances, but Jordan Walker's 50% below league average right now. It's mid-June, and Mo said mid-June in that article today. And again, I don't think it should be something that we're all like, oh, look toward mid-June, and that's for sure when they'll make the move. But it does give me a barometer of, okay, he's looking at, okay, let's get another month and a half in, and then we'll maybe make some decisions here. And I think that maybe to me is more related to a guy who's waffling at the plate as much as Jordan Walker is right now, or it's just as power zapped as Nolan Gorman is right now, versus like if they were 10% below league average and it's like, hey, you want to see steps forward, but they're not atrocious. You can put them in the lineup. Are they a negative? Yes, but they're not, I don't know, like just unplayable at that point. I think at that point, I don't see the harm in sending someone to Memphis if you've given them basically 2.5 months to figure it out and they just can't do anything. But I don't. Do you think if it's mid June and Walker is a 60 WRC plus guy and Gorm's a 70 WRC plus guy and they send them down to Memphis, do you think that's walking back that runway, or do you think there's a little bit of a middle ground here where it's like, okay, this is the runway we said we'd give them even if they're struggling, but you can only struggle so much, and the struggles can only be so deep for so long before you have to make a move.
Yeah, and I think that's probably. I think if they do that, they're going to get accused of walking back what they said, which in some degrees I think they are
Yeah,
because of like you said, the 600 plate appearances. They didn't really seem to leave a lot of room for a demotion.
yeah,
But and all of that was also kind of predicated on Nolan Arenado not being here and this
true.
team being a weaker team than it was, and um, you know, and them having opportunities to be in the lineup and not necessarily have somebody on the bench that's better than them. With Nolan staying, that threw a few rings. I think you have to do what's best for the player, and I think that's what they should be looking at more than the results, right?
Yeah.
If they think, okay, Nolan Gorman needs to go to Memphis and he needs to work with, the hitting coaches down there, and he needs to be in an environment where we can, lead him off every day so he can get, maximum plate appearances and, that kind of stuff. If that's what needs to happen, then go with it.
Mm.
That said, Nolan Gorman hits arbitration this offseason, if I'm right.
Yeah.
And you've really kind of got to figure out what you're doing with him. You probably could settle. But if you go to arbitration with a guy that's got the power numbers that he has, I mean, even with him struggling, he's going to get paid more than you'd probably like to pay him. So I think you kind of need to figure it out. I mean, does that make sense?
Oh, for sure. I mean, you're right. Even last year with how awful it was, 19 home runs, the year before 27. And that's the thing. Like, I know people have gotten real. Again, depends on who you ask. Some people want Walker and Gorman in the lineup every single day. They don't care about the present. It just prioritizes the future at all costs. There's other people who wish they were off the team in this offseason. They're already sick of it. But 2023, you have two young guys who you had Gorman put up an 806 OPS with 27 bombs and only 406 at bats. Like that was a guy who flat. And again, we all know he, even in 2023, he would have a month where he was MVP Gorman, and then the next month it was like, is this dude the worst hitter in baseball? So there
Right.
were flaws, but at the same time, you saw the heights. And again, he was able to put across a stat line across the season of an 800 plus OPS in his first full big league season. That's something you love to see from a left-handed bat like that, and something the Cardinals haven't had since. I mean, I can't think of. I mean, Matt Carpenter when he was going on his power runs, but even that's not really the same thing. And then Walker that year too. Like, it was a rough start to the year. He went down to Memphis. He came back up, and I think after he was recalled in June, he was a 20% above league average for the rest of the year. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and he again had that prospect pedigree too. And so I fully understand they had a terrible 2024 year, but I totally understood at the same time coming into 2025. And I think Gorm had a little bit of a shorter leash because he'd been around at least a little bit longer and didn't have quite the pedigree that Walker did. But for both of these guys to have a chance, and I think to your point, I think Gorm's runway, if this doesn't end well this year, I don't know. I'm not sure if he's on the 2026 roster. I don't really see a world where Walker's not here in 2026, but I do see a world where he's kind of in what Gorman was this year, where it's like, hey, we ideally would like you to be in the opening day lineup this year, but if camp rolls around and you're struggling, and I don't know who the other option would be, but maybe it's Thomas Ajacey or JJ Weatherholt fighting for an infield spot, and they're willing to move Donovan to the outfield. And it's like, now Walker's on the bench every day. I do think he's around to stay for a little bit longer, but you're right. These arbitration numbers are going to start coming up soon, and that's when teams start to kind of pull the plug on some of these types of guys. And I don't know when the Cardinals are going to get back to being a team that spends more than what they are right now, but as long as they are on a little bit of a lower budget, like, these ARB numbers are going to matter more than usual, especially if they still have Arenado on the roster, which, I mean, that's a big question mark. And Sonny Gray's contract goes up to like 35 million next year. I know they have Michaelis coming off the books, Matt's coming off the books, but they have a lot of really interesting decisions to make over the next 6 months or so. And I'm curious how Heim Bloom views all of this, because most of this we're assuming through Mo's lenses right now, but I don't know, like, how high is Heim Bloom on Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman, and how much differently does he want to handle things? Because we haven't seen a leadership change in 2 decades. So it just I try to remind myself of this often. It's hard to wrap your head around what next year is going to look like because I mean, I know the DeWitts are still in place, so there will be some stability, but we're truly moving into a new era that Cardinals fans just haven't seen a change like this in, again, a long. I mean, I guess Walt Jocketty was a little under 2 decades ago that he left, or was no longer the GM, and obviously he just passed away recently, and so, but again, it's just been decades since we've seen this type of change in St. Louis.
Yeah, I think that the Jocketty leaving is probably the closest thing because they did go from going out and getting free agents via trade and signings to really trying to develop their own people. Um, but even then, Mo was right, second in command then, and before he took the top job.
Yeah.
The DeWitts were still there. I mean, it was a shift in philosophy, but probably maybe not as strong as what we'll see. And it may, again, and we might not be able to tell a lot of difference. We just don't know. But yeah, I think there is something to that of, these guys drafted Jordan Walker. I might not have, and if Jordan Walker gets sent down this year, which is again possibility, you've used up all his option years, right? I mean, next year would have to be the put up or shut up year for him, which becomes somewhat problematic if you're not getting this. I think and we talked about it a little bit on Gateway this week. David and I did. We saw Mason win, and we've seen Victor Scott come up and maybe struggle a little bit, but take the next step the next year. We're not seeing that with Gorman and with Walker, and even if you want to go back to Dylan Carlson, that kind of thing. The guys that have maybe had some success, but then just can't follow it up. And I mean, it's hard to blame it all on development when you can see guys like Wynn and Scott take the next step. I don't want to, put it all on the players because there is obviously, maybe it's just not reaching them like it did the other two, but I don't know. I think it's hard to throw the whole organization and blame them for everything, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, for sure. Right. And like, I mean, I know I joke about it all the time, but like Brant Brown's been such a breath of fresh air so far. And it's like, well, is he failing at his job because Nolan Gorman and Jordan Walker aren't hitting right now? Or is he exceeding because all these other guys are? Or is it a mixed bag? And how much was Turner Ward a part of the issue and how much wasn't he? I mean, how much was Walker's struggles now impacted by the fact that he made the opening day roster in 2023 when probably the best thing for him was to begin the year in the minor leagues and continue to refine his approach? How open has he been to making changes? And just because you are doesn't mean it actually sinks in. I mean, we see it with guys all the time, right? There's some prospects who come up and are successful and it's not just the Cardinals. I mean, when you follow a team and look at them 24/7, you'll notice your own guys having success elsewhere more than others, but happens to every team where there's a guy who comes up, can't figure it out, goes somewhere else and changes scenery, makes it happen. Or there's some guys that have incredible rookie year, sophomore years, and then the progression isn't linear and they fall off a cliff. And it's like, man, I thought this 22-year-old phenom was going to be the next best thing, and they're not. Like, I'm still a big Julio Rodriguez believer, but you go look over in Seattle, and every single year since his breakout rookie year, he's been getting worse and worse offensively. And it's okay, are the Mariners failing him, or is this Julio Rodriguez, or what's the sauce there? It's always hard to say. I mean, I guess for Gorman, it's been interesting to see that again, he's taking a lot more walks this year again, which he did well in 2023. The strikeout rate's not great still, but he's cutting it down some. He's swinging at less pitches out of the zone. His chasing is so much better than it was before. And so it's like, okay, it seems like he's making some legitimate changes. And so at least in his profile, I could see a world where it's like, hey, he just has to get used to this new approach. And once he hits that ball in the barrel in a game and gets feeling good, then he's going to be on a roll. Walker's is the one that's weird to me though, because a couple weeks in the air, it's like, man, he's laying off that low and away slider a lot. He's taking pitches the other way he needs to. He was pulling some balls when he needed to, and I genuinely, I don't know if I think he's been worse at the plate at any point in his career than he is right now. And I believe Marmol when he's saying that he believes that Jordan's not in the dumps right now. He's working hard behind the scenes. They like what they're seeing behind the scenes, but at some point you have to see it on the field to believe it. And how long can you get away with the prep behind the scenes being where it needs to be versus on the field? But yeah, it'll be the storyline of the year until they either get sent down or until they start to succeed.
Yeah. Yeah, and you look at tonight's lineup where they had 11 hits and none of them by Jordan Walker. He did draw a walk, so maybe he needs to change his name to Jordan Hitter. I don't know, but that is when everybody, and there's always, every game that's like that, right? There's a game that the team puts up 20 hits and somebody goes over 4 or whatever the case may be. That happens. It's just frustrating when it's a guy that you're really hoping that can get off the skids, to get even a base hit here or there and get a little bit of confidence. Because I agree, it's good that he's not necessarily wearing all this, but at some point in time, it's got to start getting into his mind, right? I mean, as tough as these guys are, when you go up to I remember some of the old players talking about how they used to have very quick at bats when their batting average was 192 because they didn't want that batting average up there in 30-foot letters. Everybody, our numbers, when everybody could see that. You start you start maybe pressing a little bit and trying to do a little bit more than you should. And again, hopefully he's going to come around and we'll have this all kind of seems kind of moot here, by the All-Star break, but it's with those two guys both struggling and that being such the focus. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, or what you think on this, but the Cardinals went into this year with basically one goal or two, if you want to look at it, and get those guys right. And even though they're succeeding on the field, it feels like they're failing in the one goal that they had.
For sure. And I think you said it perfectly earlier where the Cardinals had to have their cake and eat it too. And I think the goal that they didn't start the offseason saying out loud, but then Mo just continuously started to say as the offseason went on and they weren't able to trade away guys is, well, I think we can surprise some people this year. It'd be a little bit better than people think. And so they started to get back on this 2-track mentality where it's like, we want Gorman, Walker to be studs and to figure it out, or at least to bounce back to a place where you're competent and can build upon it in 2026. But we also want to sell enough tickets that we can make some revenue back. And the way to do that is to get in the playoff race and to figure out what happens. And I guess, again, if they start producing, both things can happen at the same time, but they are going to have to pick a lane at some point in the middle of the season, or else it will feel really disjointed and rocky. And again, like to your point, they're not putting both guys in the lineup at the same time right now. And it's going to be really hard to serve both masters at the same time when they're struggling this hard. But I'm curious from your perspective, because part of the roster crunch now, or lineup crunch, I should say, that they're under as of today is the return of Ivan Herrera. And it seems like they want to DH him against left-handed pitching more often and get Pedro Pages and Pozo into the lineup at least until his knees are right. But it might be, I don't know, I could see them doing this for quite a while. And that takes, I know Baker was in that spot for a little while, but it does change the dynamic a little bit here. But I also wouldn't be surprised if Ivan Herrera DHs more often against right-handed pitching too. And that takes away some opportunities from an Alec Burleson. It definitely affects a Nolan Gorman here. So I guess a twofold question for you is, how much do you think Ivan Herrera's return and DHing will affect that dynamic? And then B, one of the storylines we just weren't really talking about coming into the year is how stinking good Ivan Herrera could be at the plate. And again, it's small sample sizes because he's had some injuries or he's had some demotions in times in Memphis, but since 2023, I think he ranks within like the top 16 hitters in all of baseball and WRC plus. Like whenever he's been up here, he's hit. It doesn't mean he's going to continue at that level, but he's in the flip side of what Gorman and Walker have shown in the last few years. Every opportunity they've gotten, they've struggled. Every opportunity Ivan Herrera has gotten, he's looked incredible.
Yeah. And I think, somebody, I don't remember who, earlier in the year suggested that they moved the wrong catcher, right? That they should have moved Herrera to first base DH versus moving Wilson Contreras, because Herrera's bat is his bat. And, we know what his defensive limitations have been. And then you could have Contreras and Pages, which makes a lot more sense as a starter backup combination. But that said, they also want Wilson Contreras' bat in the lineup more often. And, we've seen what being behind the plate has done for him sometimes. I think that I think it's very interesting to see them take this knee issue and use it to turn him into a DH, at least part-time.
Yeah.
Because I really, I mean, he caught in Memphis, and it, as far as I know, and I don't know, obviously they know more than we do, but I don't remember any extra reporting that said otherwise. He had no problems behind the plate. So, I don't know. I think it is interesting that they want to go this way, because then it kind of shortens up on Alec Burleson to some degree. It obviously, Luke and Baker got demoted, who was getting very limited playing time anyway. It's just another example of what this roster is unwieldy, don't you think?
Oh, for sure. And I wonder how much of this has to do with the rule changes over the last few years. And obviously, like, over I guess what would have been 2022 or 2021, when basically base stealing went from kind of like a lost art in today's game to now it's prevalent and it matters. And the Cardinals are in a division where the Cubs lead all of baseball in stolen bases. The Milwaukee Brewers are second. I believe the Reds are sixth, and the Pirates are ninth in stolen bases. And so they're consistently coming up against teams that swipe bags at a high rate. And again, not a high rate for a few years ago, where it really didn't impact the game all that much. You have guys stealing left and right, and you have a guy in Ivan Herrera who has taken steps forward this year in his blocking and framing and game calling, but he is throwing out less than 10% of the runners that he's facing or that are stealing on him. And then you have Pedro Pajes, who's last year struggled a little bit. He wasn't as bad as Ivan Herrera throwing out runners, but he definitely wasn't a huge upgrade. And now he's well above average in throwing out base runners, and he calls a good game and is impactful behind the plate. And I can see from their perspective, when until like the last week and a half, Alec Burleson wasn't really hitting. Luke and Baker was hitting against left-handed pitching, but again, obviously that's a really minute role on the team that he was playing. Everyone who is DHing, Bernie Miklasz put out a good video today about this. Like, the Cardinals just have gotten zero production, and he's not the only one who said this, but they've gotten next to no production out of the DH spot. And so from their perspective, they can look at it as, hey, we have below average offensive production from Pedro Bajes, but we're getting a substantial upgrade defensively there. And you're getting, again, nothing defensively from your DH spot, obviously, and you're also getting nothing offensively. So why not put a bat there that can produce at a high level and solve one problem while also not creating a new problem by putting him behind the plate? And I mean, at this point, it's been a couple years running that his arm's been an issue. And in my head, it seems like something that shouldn't be rocket science to improve, and that you should be able to go from terrible to at least competent. But for some reason, offseason after offseason, Ivan Herrera just hasn't been able to figure it out. And so, how much does that matter long term for them? I don't know. And I would think that with an automated ball system coming, or strike zone coming here soon, or at least the ability to challenge, like, framing is not going to be as important anymore. And so, again, not that it will be a lost start, but it probably, unless they go fully ABS. But it does seem like it'll put an emphasis on guys who can throw out base runners, because that's really more of the way you can impact the game. And Yvonne just can't do it. And so I don't. I'm not against him as the catcher, and I think long term, this roster still fits the best, and it maximizes his value to figure out a way to keep him behind the plate. But I also don't blame them for being really frustrated by his inability to throw out base runners at this point. And I don't know long term how he can have a profile behind the plate like that. He's pretty athletic. And so I feel like, I don't know how long Contreras is in St. Louis. I think he's here for a while, but does he at some point decide, hey, I mean, again, they're playing good baseball right now, but do they maintain it? Does he want to stay here? Is he the first baseman long term? Probably, but who knows? Could Ivan Herrera be the DH? Sure, but I don't know. Could he move to? It seems weird to put someone in the outfield when they have arm issues, but it seems like it'd be a different kind of problem out there. But could he be a left fielder long term? I don't know. And like, I mean, we're talking about Jordan Walker right now struggling in right field. Like, I don't know if their outfield's all that set long term, but outside of the Walker Gorm situation, I'm very interested to see how they handle Ivan Herrera's playing time behind the plate, and if it's a slow removal of those catching duties, and they use this knee injury as like the first layer of it, but really it's their long-term plan to move him away from the position, or if they slowly ease him back in, and then it's kind of a non-starter conversation again.
My guess would be that they were planning this at some point in time anyway, because you do have Jimmy Crooks, who is average-wise is struggling at Memphis, but still has 4 home runs, which
Yeah.
leads the team, and has shown shown skills in the past that he's going to be at least a major league backup, if not a major league starter.
Yeah.
And, they picked up Pozo, who turned into, if Pozo had not hit at all, maybe we're not talking about this, right? Maybe they just let him go and we move on our merry way. But he did, and I think it probably did just accelerate something that they had been thinking about anyway, and the knee injury. Again, when you have a bat behind the plate, and we saw it with Contreras, it becomes dangerous, right? Because those guys aren't going to play every day, and then they take foul balls and they take bats over the head and on the arm and all that kind of stuff. It's just that injury risk that's there, and you hate to lose that if you can avoid it.
Yeah, for sure. And again, that bat's just too good that you really gotta keep Ivan Herrera in your lineup every single day. And again, they don't have a whole lot of guys right now that you're married to long term, and so I don't really like. He's taking at bats away from Luke and Baker right now. I don't think it's a huge deal.
No.
He's taking away opportunities from Alec Burleson. Well, I think it's a little bit of a bigger deal, but it's not a game changer to me at all. And I would much rather, to your point, have him healthy, playing as many games as possible right now, than figure out how to get Alec Burleson time later, than to go in the opposite realm and continue. And again, he's missed a lot of time, and some of it's been catching injuries, related injuries. Obviously, the one in Boston wasn't. And so you can't blame it on that, but you do wonder how much the wear and tear of being behind the plate has influenced stuff like that. And so even if it's just to keep him healthier, I understand the move, let alone the fact that he does have a clear deficiency with his arm.
Experience a progressive lens engineered with AI from Essilor, powered by individual measurements of your visual behavior. A lens personalized to you by an Essilor expert. Discover Verilux XR Track and enjoy instantly sharp vision in motion and seamless transitions from near to far. Find your local Essilor expert today at Essilor.com.
Ladies, you'll end up shopping for your guy's deodorant, right? So try Degree's Original Cool Rush. You see, last year, Degree changed the formula, and men were mad. One guy even started a petition. So Degree admitted they messed up and brought the Original Cool Rush scent back. It's clean, crisp, and actually smells like someone you want to cuddle. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So toss one in your cart and find out why it's the best-selling men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory.
We spent a lot of time on the offense, and we could spend even more because it is an interesting topic to discuss. But let's shift a little bit to this rotation.
Yeah.
It is, and it's a rotation that we came into this year thinking this is not going to work, right? Sonny Gray will be fine. I don't know about Eric Fetty, and we'll see, and then, we thought Palante would be, maybe the number 2 and maybe, challenging Sonny. And then you've got those veterans at the end. This just isn't going to work. And yet, the addition of Matthew Liberatore has been amazing. And then we've seen good results out of Miles Michaelis. We've seen, when Steven Matz, even in the bullpen or in the starting rotation, he's been dominant. They're getting something different out of these guys than we expected. And I don't know if it's another year of Dusty Blake. I don't know if I have no idea what it is. But whatever it is, I hope it keeps working.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know what to put the finger on with it at this point. But obviously, I think the number one thing people are talking about, looking at, and rightfully so, is the emergence of Matthew Liberatore. And I was going through some old videos and pictures today just because I was trying to find something. And I clipped this little thing from an interview Mo did I think it was this past summer, where he was talking, he was being asked about like some of the trades they made over the years and the pitching woes they've had. And he's like, obviously, of course, we lost Alcantara and Gallen, and those are big losses. But he even last summer, he said, well, we still think Matthew Liberatore could be a frontline starter. And I remember I clipped it because I laughed at it. And I was like, you're really you're still trying to convince people this could work out. And again, Matthew Liberatore, I'm not trying to say he's a frontline starter right now, but man, he's looked incredible. Or I don't want to overhype it. He's looked good this year. He's looked like a middle of the rotation starter. Will that continue and last? I don't know. But one of the things that for as problematic as the club has been over the last few years, and there's so many different things we could point to as part of the issues. I would argue perhaps the biggest issue of all has been the inability to develop starting pitching, and I'm not the first one to
Mhm.
say it by any means, but I think I was crunching the numbers at the end of last season, and I think the only starter the Cardinals had developed who had made a debut in the 2020s, who made like more than 10 starts with a lower than a 5 ERA, was Andre Palante. And it's just like, how can you go 4 straight years? And I mean, it really dated back to late 2010s too, and not producing starting pitching. And then it made me think back to, you go back to the early 2010s, and you have that iconic SI cover where you have Shelby Miller and Lance Lynn and Jaime Garcia and Adam Wainwright and you have all those guys, Michael Waka on it. It's like, how did the organization go from that to this? Um, and I don't know what it means long term, but at the same time, I know there's a lot of pitching injuries in the minor leagues right now, and there's really no such thing as a starting pitching prospect because who knows what their health will be like. But you do look below, and you've got a Quinn Matthews down there. You've got Takao Roby, who's really turned things around this year and looks really interesting. Cooper Jerpy obviously is on the full season IL, and I don't know what his future looks like, but he was an intriguing arm. Tink Hence is still an intriguing arm. Uh, I'm interested to see what they do with Lynn and Holiday and different guys like that long term. But uh, if I'm again, you're asking me about the big league rotation right now, but the thing I really focused on the most, because for the most part, this team right now, I'm taking a big picture outlook of things. And the fact that they were able to help Andre Palante turn things around last year and become a competent big league starter. And Matthew Liberatore was drafted behind Bloom. I don't think it's a mistake that Bloom comes in, is taking over, and wants Liberatore in that rotation. He's turning things around right now. You look in the minor leagues, and there's more optimism about arms than there's ever been before outside of injuries happening. And it does make me wonder how much this has been a long-term play of Dusty Blake being around and the changes he's made. But obviously, Chaim Bloom and his staff coming in with Rob Cerfolio, Matt Pierpoint, they've obviously added a lot in terms of pitching development. And again, this feels too early to say it's all because of that. But I'm also wouldn't be surprised if this is early returns on stuff like that. Eric Fetty was a guy coming into the year I was very frustrated with still on the Cardinals roster.
Mhm.
It didn't make sense to me. It seemed like he was the type of guy you move on from, you get what you can. You weren't going to get some crazy return from him for him, but you knew teams were interested. And he's had 2 blow-up starts this year. He's really struggled with the walks, but again, he's also had a lot of good outings. And I'll be interested to see what they do at the deadline with a guy like that. And even if they're in contention, do they look to move some guys around that are on these expiring contracts or not? But I do think the starting pitching this year, at least at this point, I feel slightly more confident in than I did last year. Not by much. It's very reminiscent of that last year's team. But it's definitely major steps forward from 2023. It's really the bullpen that scares me night to night.
Yeah. And I'm going to come back to that because I did want to talk about what the trade deadline looks like. So we'll come back to that point before we're all said and done. It feels like the bullpen is making steps. I think one, it's helped the last 2 days, right? You know, you have Fetty throw a complete game tonight.
Yeah.
You have Sonny Gray throw 7 innings on Wednesday. You have an day off in there. You know, by the time they get around to needing arms probably tomorrow night, they'll be fully rested, and that's a good thing. I think it's interesting to see, you know, the fact that they've shifted. It really feels like they've made that move and shifted Gordon Graceffo to the bullpen. And not only have they shifted him there, I mean, they let him, you know, get a save. I mean, and not just one of those, hey, it's 3, you know, if we're up 3 runs, we'll throw you in or we have to. They left him in there and brought him into a 1-run game, and, you know, he performed. And it's going to be very interesting to see how they start to raise his profile, as it were, and the opportunities that he gets. I mean, because even just one arm like that, I think, can make you feel a lot better about a bullpen.
Oh, for sure. And one thing I need to say, because I think it's ironic, but I doesn't mean I disagree with what they did. But the Cardinals I felt like publicly have said we don't have enough pitching depth. That's part of the reason you see Michael McGreevy in AAA right now. It's part of the reason we held on to all these these veteran starters of the offseason. And then a month into the year, they turned Gordon Graceffo into a reliever. I was just like, with all the starting pitching injuries, and I'm like, I get it, because I think he profiles better as a reliever, and they need it. And to your point, I think he can change the rotation or the bullpen's outlook right now. But I just found it ironic. And Steven Matz is Ollie said they want him to stay lengthened, but it seems like at least through the rest of May, he's going to be a full-time bullpen member now. But with the way he's pitched this year, and then to your point, adding Graceffo into things, you go from Helsley, who's reserved for safe situations, and then Maton and Leahy you can rely on, and pretty much everyone else in the bullpen, it was cross your fingers and hope they get three outs. Now you've got 4 guys who can bridge you to Helsley and Helsley back there, and so you got 5 of your 8 bullpen guys that if Matt's Graceffo, it's probably too early for Graceffo, but I'll go ahead and throw him in the group as I'm at least more interested in him than I have been. Roycroft's looked better since he's come back, but obviously he had a rough start to the year. Fernandez was terrible, but when Maton, Leahy, I'll throw Graceffo in there for now, and Matt's come into the games, I feel pretty confident that they can bridge the gap and get you to Helsley. And Helsley definitely doesn't look sharp this year, and I think there are reasons to be concerned about things because his fastball is just really hittable right now. His slider has been a wipeout pitch for him over the last few years, and it is just not the same this year. But I have to think some of it has to be the super infrequent usage so far. And so I would love to see what he looks like when he's being used on a more regular schedule. And again, some of that is within their control about if they use him in non-safe situations or not. But I feel like I just don't want to bet against Ryan Helsley's talent. And so I feel like as he gets some more consistent opportunities, those will look cleaner as they go through too. And it's like last year's bullpen in 2024, there was a probably 2 to 2.5 month stretch where you could go to Helsley, you could go to JoJo, Kittredge, Fernandez, and those guys were nails every time. And when you have 4 to 5 guys that you can, and John King was even reliable in that stance. And if over half your bullpen you can trust in big spots, you're going to win a lot more ball games. And so when you have 3 or less, like they did for a while, I don't know how you do it, especially when you from game to game guys are unavailable and you are getting short starts from guys. So to your point again, like if Gray and Fetty and Liberatore and some of these guys consistently get you 6-7 inning outings, that will help your bullpen out a ton. But even last year, you were getting 4 to 5 innings from these guys, and the bullpen was able to nail it down. So I do feel better if this bullpen or this rotation can get you a little bit more length this year. And then you're not, again, this is not, I doubt this bullpen ends up even looking like the 2024 one at all by the end. I mean, a few weeks ago, we were unsure, or this bullpen ranked in the bottom 3 in baseball, and now it's creeped its way up sneakily into a top. I think last time I checked, it was like ranked 19th in ERA in baseball, which is crazy to think that there's potentially 11 bullpens that are worse than the Cardinals right now. But yeah, that's baseball right now. But I am intrigued by the group they have. But again, week to week, month to month, these relievers can be volatile.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the nature of bullpens. I mean, that's why I was a little hesitant with the fact that they were pretty much bringing back everybody from last year, and the fact that you knew that Helsley was going to take a step back anyway, no matter. You knew that, probably. I mean, you just had you knew that somebody. I mean, some would probably carry over. I think I was very surprised that Ryan Fernandez was as bad as he was.
Yeah.
But you just run that risk of, if you don't have that churn in a bullpen, I just don't think you can get too enamored with relievers. But yeah, I think that, you look at how that has gone, and right now, again, we've seen some good stuff out of Romero lately. We saw some, really big situation with him and the Mets in that first game of the doubleheader that he came through in. If he's starting to find his footing, like you said, Roycroft has looked a lot better. It does feel like maybe you're getting a little bit closer to that, a little bit less likely of, oh, they've got to bring this guy in, we're doomed. And I don't know that I feel that as much as I did earlier in the year with Romero and Fernandez. But I guess it was this time last year. By this time last year, every win the Cardinals had, Ryan Helsley had the save, or at least had appeared in it, right? I mean, it went late into the year before they actually won a game without him appearing. So yeah, he was pitching a lot more often, and I think you're probably right. And we've had, 2 or 3 times where he's gone 4 or 5 days without throwing.
Yeah.
And you don't want to overuse him, but he also, you need to get him out there. And I know it's I'm not really blaming Ollie on that because it is a difficult thing to do. As soon as you throw them in a game that you lose and you need them the next day, and all of a sudden they're not available the day after. But you got to find ways to keep them sharp, I think.
Yeah, and I'm curious too, because they haven't really addressed the subject since I think it was 2 off seasons ago or 2 spring trainings ago when I know Helsley commented on the ARB case this past year, but I think it was 2 years ago that he really was vocal about how his dissatisfaction with it. And one of the things he talked about was they used against him the fact that he was putting up stats but not getting saves. And so it seemed like it was a mutual decision by the Cardinals and Helsley that, hey, we're going to commit you to this role because we think you're highly effective in it, only getting staying in these safe situations. It'll keep you healthier. And from Helsley's perspective, he wants to get paid, and I don't blame him. And if the Cardinals are frustrated by that, then just pay the man and don't penalize him for being able to be utilized in big spots in the 7th and 8th innings or non-safe situations. And so I don't know how much, because I think people will get frustrated, Ollie, about not using him in other spots, but I'm curious how much of that is a mutual decision or a Helsley-led decision, because we saw Josh Hader with the Milwaukee Brewers a few years ago refuse to pitch in back-to-backs, refuse to pitch in non-safe situations because he was the same way, and I don't blame him. But also, again, with this bullpen too, like, can he get closer to that 2024 unit would be a huge, but also with the way this lineup is producing, they basically had to have a bullpen that was as stinking good as it was last year to win as many games as they did, because their lineup was just atrocious. And you're right, like, they couldn't win a game without it being a 1-score, 2-score game. And now you're getting these blowout wins. You're winning by 4 or 5 runs at times. There's been multiple times this year where Helsley's warming up in the bullpen, and then they scored the 4th or 5th insurance run to make it a non-save situation. And that's a good thing. Like, none of us are complaining about that. It adds an extra dynamic for Ollie to have to work through of how do we get Helsley into these games. But they don't need to have a bullpen as good as last year if this offense can be substantially better like it's been so far. But again, it would be really nice to build a trust to these guys late in games.
Yeah. All right, let's pull the pin then out of what we were talking about earlier. Cardinals win tonight. Cubs lose, Reds lose, Brewers lose. Right now, the Cardinals are 2 games out of the NL Central. Now, granted, we are not even to Mother's Day. There's still a long way to go. But say it stays roughly like this. Say that the Cardinals are within shouting distance of first, hanging around the wild card race, getting to mid-July, the All-Star break. What do you do? Do you add to this team? Do you go ahead and sell the pieces off? How do you approach the trade deadline for a team that is flawed and is supposed to be looking to develop, but might be contending in spite of that?
Is it what I would do or what they will do?
No, I'm pretty sure I know what they're going to do. What would you do?
What I would do. Yeah, that's a good question. I think if you're in it like this, you're flawed. But again, it is a new era of baseball where you do have a 3rd wild card, and you can make a run in October as a flawed team and look back and be like, how did that Diamondbacks team go as far as it did? I would take that Diamondbacks team probably right now over this Cardinal team, but still at the same time, you squint your eyes and are like, okay, that's interesting. They made it through. I'm not trying, again, not at all trying to get ahead of the train here and say the Cardinals are going to do something like that. But I think what you can do, and I'm sure it'll make a lot of people upset, but it's probably the best thing for the future, is you still capitalize on the trade value of a guy like a Ryan Helsley, because he's a luxury for a team that has real World Series aspirations. I don't think he's a luxury you can afford to have on the final year in his deal on a team that's a fringe contender. I just don't. And I think what he can get you in return is probably going to be more impactful for 2026, 2027, 2028, because assuming Ryan Helsley's not resigned, he's not even going to be here. Nolan Arenado, we saw how much it was like pulling teeth to try and move him this offseason. And if a team has an offer on the table that they like at this deadline, I don't know how they say no, because what if he has a bad second half and you're kind of hamstrung with that contract again? And I know it's not crazy, but I'm sure Chaim Bloom would like flexibility going forward. What do you do with Eric Fetty or Steven Matz? Those guys matter a little bit less to me because I don't think the returns would be crazy anyways, but I think you probably shop them. But I think at least if you explore the Helsley and Nato route, I'm curious what you would think about this, but I think you can do a little bit of a sell, make your bigger moves are selling. But then, like, if you traded a Ryan Helsley at the deadline, I wouldn't be upset if they went and acquired a reliever that's not Ryan Helsley, but cost them a lot less to acquire in a trade than they got back for Ryan Helsley. They go get a rental 34-year-old reliever that's been pretty good this year, can fill that, can be a 6th, 7th inning arm for them as they move Maton and Leahy and Graceffo and Matz further back into the bullpen, something like that. I have a hard time, at least right now, with where this team is at, being content with the idea that they would hold on to pieces because it would feel like they have 1 foot in 2 different boats. And the boat that it serves best is the man on the way out. And the boat that it hampers and hurts is the person who's going to be taking over the operation. I'm curious from your perspective, do you think the Cardinals, like, let's say they make a playoff push, not only make the playoffs, but they're competitive, they buy a little bit at the deadline, or even if they make the playoffs, do you think that's helpful to Chaim Bloom? Like, do you think people get more excited about him coming in because of that? Or do you think it's better to acquire talent for the future and set him up in that way?
Well, I think it's better for him to acquire the talent. Are people more excited about him taking over a team that was, I mean, even if he takes over this team, right? Though, I mean, you do have Helsley walking, Matz and Michaelis are gone. You've got guys like Burleson that, maybe you don't know what to do with. It's I think more than anything to say what this team is now versus what this team is going to be next year, even without trades or anything like that, you're going to take a step back because of maybe not a step back, but you're definitely going to have the turnover.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to, if no one wants to stay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. And again, he's a guy that could be here. He could be here for the next good Cardinal team if you're talking about just a couple of years. But Matz, Michaelis, Helsley, they're all gone. I mean, they're not going to be here. There's no way they're going to get re-signed. If Mo was staying, I wouldn't say that necessarily. But with Chaim Bloom taking over, there's no way. I mean, he doesn't have the connection to these guys. There's not that need. I mean, could they re-sign one of them maybe just for depth? Because that is, that does mean your rotation is Sonny Gray, Andre Palante, Matthew Liberatore, and then Michael McGreevy, and maybe Tico Arobi, depending on how much Quinn Matthews gets to pitch this year.
Yeah.
That you could see them signing some sort of veteran like that for some insurance, but most of them are gone. And I think that, if you can get something for Miles Michaelis as a trade, if Miles Michaelis pitches in the ballpark of what he's been pitching so far, there's going to be a team that's going to be interested in him.
Yeah.
I would think a team that needs some consistent innings, somebody like the Dodgers that's had a lot of injuries that maybe just needs a guy to go out there every 5th day that might not even be on the playoff roster, but will trade you some AA prospect that they don't need for him. And maybe that's good enough. I don't know. I think it's going to be an interesting balancing act, but I'm with you. I would not want to see them hold these pieces and then, or even try to acquire pieces that, may or may not help.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic, right? Because if Mo wants to go out and get somebody, he's got to trade some of these prospects that are really kind of under Chaim Bloom's control. And so they're going to have to come to some sort of arrangement. And I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah. That's where I think people have been worried about it. But if you were, I guess if you're clearly contending, I mean, say they have a 6-game lead in the division right now, I still don't think I feel very great about the idea of them adding to this team.
Yeah.
But I think most people, or a lot of people, were under the impression that they get to this deadline and they're going to be out of it back in the offseason, and that it becomes pretty clear what you do. The part people got worried about is, what if you're within striking distance? Whose voice matters more? Is it Bloom's?
Yeah.
Is it Mo's going forward? There's also a part of me too that's like, you're mentioning Michaelis, Matz, Arenado, Fetty, Helsley. how much worse are they if you trade them away? Like, again, I think especially if you trade away all those guys, that's a blow because
Right,
you're losing
right.
depth, you're losing innings. There's a reason people are trading for them, but especially if they only moved a few of them. Like, I don't think it's crazy to think they could still be almost as good of a team as they would have been with them towards the last 2 months of the year. And does it hurt your chances? Sure, but could they be like the Tigers? And it's like, well, we sold the deadline and still made the playoffs. I wouldn't be shocked by it because if you're contending this year, you want it to be because Victor Scott got you there, because Wayne got you there, hopefully Walker and Gorman got you there, Ivan Herrera. You want it to be because of this young core moving forward, not because Eric Fetty led you there and Nolan Arenado led you there. I mean, Arenado, to your point, is a really interesting one where it's if he wants to stay here, I'm not against him being here for sure. Like when I said you move that contract, it's because I'm under the impression that both sides would still prefer that to be the route of this deadline. But I easily could see, especially with the vibes being how they are this year and Nolan clearly wanted to be a Cardinal, and he's made it clear he wasn't discontent being a Cardinal. He was just open to other routes that could potentially be better. He might have changed his mind, be like, I want to just stay here and stick it out and see what happens. And if he does, then I don't see a problem with that. And his contract does go down year to year, but it is the Helsley, the Fetty, the Matz, the Michaelis that, to your point, maybe one of those starting pitchers comes back as a depth piece, but for the most part, these are not a part of your team long term. And whatever you can get for them, especially Helsley, I think can get you something really interesting if he's a highly productive closer at this deadline. But we'll see. But do you think it'd be crazy that they could, let's say they trade Helsley and Fetty and one of Matz or Michaelis, that they could still be a competent team down the stretch and not really miss a beat?
I think that, it's possible. And I think that, I was one that wrote an article last year that they should trade Helsley at last year's deadline because they had already kind of, they'd fallen out of the playoff race and it just didn't feel like a team that was going to make it. So, cash in while you could. And they obviously didn't do it over this winter. And so I doubt that they would. But, you could move a Helsley and, you figure you might lose 1 or 2 games that you wouldn't have lost otherwise in, August and September, because you're only looking at 60 games there, right?
Yeah.
After the trade deadline. You could lose 1 or 2 games, but most relievers can lock down 80% of the saves, right?
Yeah.
If you turn that over to, especially if Romero's looking good, you let Romero be your closer. Yeah, you might lose a game or 2 that you wouldn't have otherwise, but I think you'd be okay. If you trade a starting pitcher the way Michael McGreevy has looked, you're probably okay, right? He's not going to be as dominant as he's been, but
yeah,
he's also probably, just as good as Michaelis and maybe Fetty. Although Fetty, again, Fetty looked really good tonight.
Yeah.
If you start trading Matz and Michaelis and Fetty,
yeah,
I don't know that. Unless you're getting some sort of pitching prospect back that's, a AAA prospect that you feel like you can promote to the majors or something like that, I don't know that they have the depth to handle all of that and still be contending.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason I'm really out on the idea of them trying to do anything this year. Not only do I think they lack the top end upside of, I don't even have to say it, but we all know like the Dodgers and the Mets and the Phillies and all these teams, but they also lack the depth to overcome a few injuries. Like they've been relatively healthy this year and they've missed Ivan Herrera for a decent amount of time, but the rotation's been healthy. The bullpen hasn't had injuries, and besides a few knickknacks here and there to the lineup, they've been okay. I think this ship could very quickly become very shaky if you lose Brendan Donovan for a stretch and Large Nootbaar, and that's very possible because it happens to teams all the time. Or if, even for how frustrated fans have been, but like Michaelis goes down, Fetty goes down, and Palante goes down, it's like your rotation is now Gray, McGreevy, Matz, Graceffo, and Drew Rom here soon, or that equation gets very messy very quickly. And so I think even like I'll go back to Helsley. I think Helsley could get you something really intriguing long term that has some upside. I think it doesn't mean it'll work out, but it's something that you would look at and be like, oh, like I'm really interested to see this guy's future. Even with Michaelis, Matz, Fetty types, if any of those guys are dealt the deadline, that can help build up some of that depth long term that they need, because you see over the course of a season, you need starting pitching depth to get by. We've seen all the injuries already to the guys that we're intrigued by in Memphis and Springfield, even if they're just adding some guys there that you don't love the idea of it, but that they need to make 5 starts at the big league level for you next year, you can get by. That's helpful for 2026. That's helpful for 2027 to have options like that. And I mean, Matt Savanson, again, not super intrigued by him long term, but that's a reliever you can rotationally turn to, and that's what they turned Paul DeYoung into, right? And you got Semper Bursa, who might end up being one of those 5 starts a year type of guys if you need them out of the Jordan Hicks trade. I think Jordan Montgomery maybe is the better comp. I don't think you get as much as you did for him in a Ryan Helsley trade, but could you get a Takeo Roby, a Thomas Sajasi type, or one of those type of guys in return for Ryan Helsley? That's really helpful for the next contending version of this club. Much rather see them go down those routes than try to masquerade as a playoff team and fingers crossed that they make some crazy run.
Yeah. I think that now I do think the front office has this desire to be in the playoffs for numerous reasons, and obviously we would like to see them in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. It's trying to make sure that not to push all your chips, trying to do that just so you can get bounced in the first round, by the Dodgers or the Padres or whoever the case may be, because it's hard to imagine matching up when you get run into other pitching staffs with these guys. But that's like I said, a long way down the road. If you're 6 games up, then yeah, maybe you do something, because that means if you're 6 games up in this division, that probably means everything's going well, right? And so maybe you do add a piece to at the deadline that because you could. I mean, if this lineup is clicking, it's a lineup that can play with a lot of people.
Yep.
And you get good pitching in a good bullpen, and you take your chances. Now, we're saying this also in the glow of a 6-game winning streak. Talk to us next week after they've played the Phillies and I forgot who else they've got coming up.
They've got the Brewers coming up, maybe, or I might be wrong.
They've got. I know that they've got I think they said a dozen games after the Nationals of teams that are above 500.
Yeah,
so
their May's tough.
You start talking about that, and when we get to the end of May, they may be far enough out that this all kind of feels moot. But right now, it's at least worth discussing
for sure.
So, all right, you got anything you want to talk about or promote or do anything with before we wrap it up?
No, this is super fun. And like you said, this could be a very relevant conversation in 10 days and people are even more optimistic, or 10 days from now, we could be like, oh, is this guy falling and the Cardinals going to blow it all up and Ollie can be fired? All this can change so quickly, right? The 6-game win streak can do that for you. So, and this club is definitely not immune from a 6-game losing streak. So, I do like the vibes right now. I do think they're going to trend in the right direction. And as of right now, I barring injuries, because I do think they are very thin and I don't think they can withstand that. I think a few injuries here and there can really take them off the rails here. But if they remain pretty healthy, and this is the type of team we're seeing moving forward, again, not a 6-game win streak team, but I think this could be a team that's going to make things interesting down the stretch, that will have to force interesting conversations in July where they have to make a decision if they're going to buy or sell, and that they can be an intriguing team down the stretch. And obviously, I'm not rooting for them to miss the playoffs. I'd love to see this team make the playoffs. I just don't want to see them sacrifice the future on the altar of how do we sneak in and re-interest the fan base, because those things do matter. And obviously, revenue does matter for this team long term, but it would just really suck to see them take the wind out of Chaim Bloom's sails a little bit long term, in terms of again, the excitement would be helpful for him, but the talent in the organization and on the big league roster, they need to keep that trending upward for the future rather than taking pieces away for the sake of Mo going out on top as much as he wants to. So otherwise, I mean, we've got our podcasts. We go live multiple times a week on D on the Cards. And obviously I'm writing over at Redbird Rants and stuff too. So appreciate when people check things out. And obviously, I mean, I just appreciate being on here, Daniel. And I just love listening to your podcast, love listening to other content, love interacting with people on Twitter, because I just think the Cardinals fan base is a special place to be. And it's so fun how many gifted people are in the space, and not everyone thinks the same and not everyone looks at things the same. And it makes for really fun and intriguing conversations throughout the year. And I just love being able to interact with everyone in this.
Yep. It is a lot of fun, and thankfully they're giving us a lot more fun things to talk and discuss. So we'll see how long that goes. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up for this week. But until next week, that's Josh. I'm Daniel. Good night.
That moment when you realize your skincare is actually working. That's Rodan & Fields, the #1 female dermatologist-founded skincare brand in the U.S. Designed by 2 dermatologists who don't just know women's skin, they know how to formulate for it. Rodan & Fields, love what you see. Tap the banner or visit rodanandfields.com/Spotify to get your exclusive welcome offer.
Parents of tweens, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
Arenado, deep left. Has he done it? Goodbye! A grand slam to end the night.
2 fastballs and decided to go breaking ball and hung it. What a night for the St. Louis Cardinals, coming all the way back. Down 2 in the 9th to Devin Williams to tie it. And a walk-off slam.
Hi, everyone. Rich Bray here with a look back at the day Cardinals rookie Shelby Miller came a leadoff broken bat single away from a no-hitter. On May 10th, 2013, the 22-year-old right-hander allowed a leadoff single to Eric Young Jr., then retired the next 27 batters he faced in a 3-0 win over the Colorado Rockies. As a 2009 first-round pick out of Brownwood High School in Brownwood, Texas, Miller entered the 2013 season as Baseball America's number 6 prospect, while Baseball Prospectus had him ranked 16th, and MLB.com had him ranked number 25. Entering his May 10th start against the Rockies, Miller was 4-2 with a 1.96 ERA and 38 strikeouts in 36 2/3 innings. Pitching before a crowd of 37,800 fans at Busch Stadium, Miller opened the game by falling behind Young 3-1. He came inside with a fastball just off the plate, but Young, a switch hitter batting left-handed, was able to punch the ball into right field. "It was a jam shot, and I just put it in a good location," Young said. "I was just fortunate enough to find grass." Young was the only Rockies hitter to find grass that day. After Young stole second, Rockies outfielder Dexter Fowler popped up, and Miller struck out both Carlos Gonzalez and Troy Tulowitzki to get out of the inning. Miller went on to compile 13 strikeouts on the day and ended the game by striking out Young on 3 pitches, concluding the game with a 95-mile-an-hour fastball. "I've always been told I get better later in games," Miller said. As Miller cruised through the Rockies lineup, the Cardinals scored their 3 runs on an RBI single by Pete Kozma, a solo home run from Carlos Beltran, and a sacrifice fly by John Jay. With the win, Miller improved to 5-2 on the season with a 1.58 ERA. He finished the year 15-9 with a 3.06 ERA and 169 strikeouts over 173 1/3 innings. He placed 3rd in the National League Rookie of the Year voting behind Jose Fernandez and Yasiel Puig. In 2014, Miller went 10-9 with a 3.74 ERA for the Cardinals before he and pitching prospect Tyrell Jenkins were traded to the Braves for Jason Hayward and Jordan Walden. Miller was an all-star in Atlanta in 2015 before he was traded to Arizona. He has since pitched for the Rangers, Cubs, Pirates, Giants, Dodgers, and Tigers, and at age 34 is now 3-0 with a 1.15 ERA as a member of the Diamondbacks bullpen. So that's the story of how Shelby Miller came a leadoff single away from a no-hitter. For more Cardinals history, visit stlredbirds.com or follow me on Twitter at Remembirds, REMEMBIRDS.
The 0-2 pitch. He got him! Strikeout number 13! 27 in a row in one of the most dominating pitching performances ever by a Cardinals rookie.